The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander. And tonight, I am joined by both the guys from Pistols Firing. Of course, the owner, CEO, bigwig, president, Mr. Do-It-All himself, Marshall Scott, and fellow Oklahoma State grad, but also writer and Mr. Do-It-All himself as well, too, Dekota, Gregory. So thanks so much for you guys for joining tonight on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Let me get to grace the presence of our CEO.
Yeah, well, Marshall's got a whole mic set up and everything, so we're rocking and rolling over here.
My camera is by far the worst, though.
Well, I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, I always appreciate that kind of shout out there too. At the CGA Tour, trying to build that up a little bit here, but and first and foremost, hopefully the audio quality is good. So I try to pride myself on here. But with that being said, want to talk through the Oklahoma State football season upcoming here, see kind of what different news and stuff is coming out, at least as of today or yesterday, and then also talk about the wrestling season as well too, since we got Dekota on. I got to ask him, I feel like you're the wrestling guy for Pistols Firing. Am I wrong in saying that?
I thought that's become the thing in the last year, all of a sudden.
Yeah, well,
he is that guy.
Well, yeah. It seems like you're the person to ask when it comes to all the wrestling info here. But with that being said, football season kicks off this month. We're now in August. It seems like the offseason was for forever. There were numerous Ollie Gordon, just kind of frequent updates here, down, whatever, all type of stuff here. Most recently, I think his knee seems fine, right? We were all just spooked by some random Twitter account that looked like a buffalo or looked like something else, and there's no ifs, no truths behind that at all, I don't think, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem as if maybe he got a little nick in practice, whatever day that was at this point, I don't remember. So maybe that much of it is true. And then with him being, the guy on OSU's campus, obviously that can get out of hand really quick. But yeah, it seemed like, Gundy said that he's not going to answer questions about injuries, which is pretty par for the course on Mike Gundy. But as he was doing that on Thursday, our availabilities are all sorts out of whack right now, but I think it was on Thursday. Ollie walked by in practice gear after practice and was yelling, so everything seems to be fine.
Yeah, I was watching the BYU game most recently. It was on ESPNU not too long ago. I think the Bedlam game actually was on before that, and Ollie's kind of hopping off the field, and one snap or two, and then he comes back on a little bit later. So hopefully that was all that was created, is half a glimpse of somebody seeing walking by practice and thinking they can make some news there. But that's always good to hear. Dekota, what are you most excited for to see out of this Oklahoma State team this season here?
The experience, right? I think that's the biggest story of not just having, I jokingly told Zane Flores and Marshall, I talked to the media today, that Alan Bowman's been playing college football, it seems like, for half his life. I did the math, and I was like, it honestly might be kind of close to that. But his experience, you get Gordon back, but I think earlier when I was driving and I was thinking about, I was like, man, what do Calvin will ask us? And I kept thinking about the offensive line, because that's where most of the experience, I think that's the most undervalued part of this team. I mean, not only did they, pave the way for Ollie Gordon to be the best running back in the country last year, but also, I mean, there was a stretch where Alan Bowman was untouched, basically, and that's when he was at his best. And it's hard to fail. I mean, anything can happen, but it's hard to fail if that experience of an offensive line stays healthy. Knock on wood, that tends to be how things go for Gundy. But I think usually we tend to think, even when they're returning, you guys have been around OSU football just as long as I have, you're like, the line's not that good, right? You just it's how we feel. They usually get banged up. So I don't think people are appreciating how big of a deal it is to have all those guys back for the season, especially while they get the block for Ollie again as well.
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys think that this offensive line is the best offensive line we've had since I think since 2007. The Russell Kung and Brandon. I mean, Pettigrew I knew was a tight end, but kind of that year, I don't remember too many famous offensive lines between now and then. Of course, Okung was a top 10 draft pick in the NFL too, so it's hard to beat that as well.
Yeah, I think Whedon had a good line. What was that, 11? Or it had to have been 11. I think Whedon had a pretty good line just because I've done so many stats on Mason Rudolph versus Brandon Whedon and how much Mason Rudolph had gotten sacked during his tenure. But as far as 07 goes, I'll just probably believe it because whenever I was 12 during the 07 season, Offensive line was not a priority on my watch list. I wasn't breaking down offensive line film, but they seem like it seems like a good group. And Dekota kind of mentioned, there's always that looming threat of injuries, but even to an extent, they've tried to shore up as much as they can there. They bring in Isaiah Glass, who's a starting tackle for Arizona State. They've still got a guy like Taylor Macherko who's played a ton, and then they've got a lot of good young guys that I've heard about. Austin Kowecki, pretty much since he stepped on campus, I've heard nothing but really good things about him. He just hadn't been able to crack, any meaningful playing time because they've been so experienced ahead of him. So I think they got some young guys that they like behind, that starting group of, I think Gundy said 7 or 8 that they can roll through pretty heavily. I'm not exactly entirely sure who's in that. I imagine, the first 6 or 7 are pretty self-explanatory, but beyond that. So I think this is as good an offensive line as they've had, certainly in any recent history.
Awesome. Well, the other thing coming out at least out of practice, but out of Gundy news notes here lately is I don't know exactly when he said it. I don't think it was today though, because it'd be too quick to follow up on Newswise. Gundy said, "Hey, have your agents quit calling." Is any idea why Gundy's just commenting on NIL on a random weekday in August? Is anything spurring this at all?
Yeah, so that was it. He didn't fully answer the question that was asked of him. It was Barry Trammell asking him a question about, are you excited past all this NIL stuff? Are you just excited to have a 12-team playoff with this new look conference? Is that exciting to him? And it was a similar question that Barry asked him the week before. I don't know if Barry was just looking for a better quote on it, because Gundy kind of didn't answer it then either and kind of started talking about NIL. And then kind of Gundy goes into it and was like, "Hey, tell your agents to quit calling me." And obviously that makes all the big headlines. But I don't think any of us there really, took it some type of way or thought that this was going to be national news, just because it was like, wait, that wasn't even really an answer to the question that you were, I don't know. And it's fine that he can go any way he wants with any of these questions. But there are just some things that he says that I think the national horde of media likes to kind of jump on and attach itself to. And obviously that's a pretty headlineable, quote to tell your agents to quit calling me and stuff like that. But it was just, it was weird. It wasn't necessarily, within the flow of things. And I didn't expect it to blow up, I guess, when I was sitting there watching it happen as much as it has.
Yeah, I would compare it to, from what you're saying, I compare it to the Josh Giddey quote after he got beaten in the Olympics, where he goes, "Sucks, I've got to wait you got to wait 4 more years." And the time being, no one's really thinking about that. But then, of course, with getting all the offseason stuff last year, it becomes a meme within 5 seconds, because Giddey's got to wait a certain amount of years. And so it just becomes a little talking point there. As we're talking about, though, just, hey, August 31st, not too far away, the South Dakota State team. I've tried to deep dive a little bit into their record, their history, etc. I'm curious from both of you guys what you think could trip us up in that game overall, because I wouldn't think it'd be talent, at least, or I hope it's not.
I think any team that wins like that's scary, regardless of level or talent. When I was a coach for a little bit, and that was something, if you had a team that you were playing and they're on a roll, it's a little scary. Even if you're hey, if we would have played them last week, we wouldn't have been scared, but there's just something about a team that they know how to win. It's a cliche thing, but you just forget how to lose. And I was it's an FCS team. But the fact that Gundy, the last, 2 or 3 availabilities, has, out of context, almost brought up South Dakota State. Was it Marshall? Was it UMass? Maybe at the conference, or talking about a rival or something. You could take the place of OU or Texas, and he's worried about South Dakota State right now. And then he started talking about how good they are, and he has the last couple. So Gundy obviously sees something, unless he's just avoiding the Big 12 question. But he obviously sees something where he continues to bring them up, and something has him on edge about him.
Yeah, I think their quarterback, Mark, I don't know how to say his last name, Gronowski. It's not Gronkowski, but it's a similar vein. He won the Walter Payton Award, which is the FCS Heisman last year. A lot of people thought he was going to hop in the portal, go to a bigger school. He did not. He returned to South Dakota State. So that's a little freaky. He's 6'3", 230. That's a lot of dude. And he's obviously skilled enough to win that award and to lead this team to 29 straight wins and 2 national titles. So kind of like Dekota said, you're just kind of worried about a team that doesn't lose a whole lot. I think their last loss was a 7-3 game to Iowa, in which Iowa scored, I believe, like 2 safeties and a field goal is something ridiculous. So, not that Oklahoma State, I imagine, will find a more fun ways to watch them score. But that's obviously a tough team with a good quarterback, a solid defense. I think it's an obvious trap game to the point where I don't know. I think Oklahoma State will handle its business there, just because that South Dakota State's on this long winning streak. They've won 2 straight FCS national titles, and then with how bad OSU was in the non-conference last year, I think that's going to loom on a lot of those guys that were in there, that kind of watched that happen, that were part of that South Alabama game, and then obviously you hope there's no 3-way quarterback duel going on. So I think for all of those reasons, Oklahoma State's going to be fine in this game. But that's not to take anything away from South Dakota State. I think if this was running an average Oklahoma State team, which is above average as far as everybody else goes, but an average Oklahoma State team that didn't have the South Alabama game looming over its head, I think this game gets a lot scarier. But I just think with all that context, I think that this is a game that Oklahoma State should be, not confident, but should go into knowing that this is a big deal, and that this is a game that they need to take seriously. So I think for all those reasons, as much of it as it seems like a trap game, I think Oklahoma State's going to be fine.
And just to piggyback off of Marshall mentioned too is, I think it will be scary. Like, I don't think they're going to handle it, just because he mentioned South Alabama, but also Central Arkansas was not a pretty game. And even thinking back to like 2021, they make a Fiesta Bowl. And I remember after game 1 being like, this is not a good football team. There's just something about conference openers where OSU does not come out, which Kyle Cox on our site wrote something. I mean, maybe it'll be different this year. We talk about the experience and all those lines, and Ollie coming back, and Bowman, and like Marshall mentioned, they had the experience of South Alabama last year. So maybe it'll be different. But traditionally, from recent memory, home openers have definitely been scary for OSU.
Yeah, I think I say it now maybe once a podcast, but my favorite stat for this football season is that the O-line for Oklahoma State is, on average, older than the Thunder's starting lineup was last year. So it's just wild. You talk about the experience. It's just wild how much goes into that. As far as the quarterback stuff goes, I know when Ryan Russillo is making kind of a meme or trying to be funny about our quarterback, and Alan Bowman cute about it, and it gets brought up, hey, he was in the same class, same high school class as Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. It's definitely good to know a guy's been in college quite a bit, but do you think there's any reason why Alan Bowman would not be the starter, going far into the season? Through several simulations, it seems like maybe the only thing that would happen this season, if something did happen to change, is that Zane Flores would step in or somebody else.
Yeah, I think it would take, a dreadful, nightmarish first couple of games. Maybe you lose one of those non-con games, and then you open the Big 12 slate with Utah. You lose that game, you lose K-State. Then I think you can start talking Zane Flores, and kind of doing what's best for the future. But I think it's Allen's team. I don't think there's any kind of question about that. I think so long as they're winning games, and even if they do trip up early at some point. Last year they're 2-2 at one point. It looked like the bowl streak was ending. It looked like the sky was falling, and then they go on to win 10 games and play in the Big 12 title game. So I think it would take a lot for OSU, just because of where this season is at. You just need, I think, the steadiest hand you can have. And while the highs maybe are higher with Zane Flores, it's tough to say. We've never seen him play a college snap, but if that is the case, I don't know that the average play is going to be better than a 8th year, 7th year, whatever Alan Bowman's going into. So I think some incredulous stuff would have to happen to where, at that point, maybe Alan Bowman's the least of the fan base's worries if stuff starts going that south to where they replace him. But just with, if as good as they are at receiver, as good as they are at running back, obviously, we mentioned the offensive line, you just kind of need a guy to mediate those type of things. Just get the ball into Brennan Presley's hands, hand the ball off to Ollie Gordon, and throw a jump ball to Rashad Owens, things like that. So I think it would take something incredulous for Alan Bowman to not be the guy the whole season.
And I also feel like Bowman's kind of like the dream quarterback scenario for Mike Gundy. He talks, they're not ready yet, they need more experience, they need more. That's all Bowman's got. Like, he's got all kinds of experience, and it seems to be that is exactly what Mike Gundy wants in a quarterback, and that is definitely what he has with Alan Bowman. You can't say you can knock Bowman on a lot, but experience is not one of the knocks on him.
Well, I think I view everything as just such an OSU fan, OSU bias, but I'm not seeing maybe what's Bowman's deficient in, and what Zane Flores or whoever else could be behind him could be better in. How, if you're ranking like Oklahoma State quarterbacks, and granted, say Rudolph and Whedon don't count in this, kind of scope here, but where does Bowman, do you think, rank in amongst previous Oklahoma State quarterbacks we've seen, and how good he is?
I think, and this is going to be a bad, some people I guess won't like this example, but Taylor Cornelius threw for a ton of yards. I think he's maybe below, I think very highly, our podcast thinks very highly of Clint Shelf, and what he was able to do. I think he's kind of below that echelon. He's below a Zach Robinson type. I think he's below a Spencer Sanders type, where, Spencer Sanders not maybe necessarily the most celebrated OSU quarterback right now, just given how close we are to all that stuff. But I think he's like around a Taylor Cornelius. The difference being Taylor Cornelius had so many years to prepare himself to get ready to kind of take over the reins of Oklahoma State's offense, whereas Alan Bowman kind of got a 3 quarterback rotation, and then they decided, hey, this is the guy during game 4. So then he kind of had to build the ship as he was flying a little bit. So I think that's kind of the realm that I expect Alan Bowman to play into this year. Really, though, it's just got to turn the interceptions down, and I think everything's gonna be fine.
Which Marshall's even more the level-headed one, and so that's when I come in. I really think, though, about the other day, if he has the season that we're expecting to have from OSU, right? Say they win the Big 12, or say he goes to the Big 12 title game twice, they go to a playoff game. I think by the end of the season, that would put him up where you consider him a top 5 OSU quarterback, correct? If he's going to lead the team, especially if they win one, but if he leads them to 2 Big 12 championship games, has 2 10-win seasons, puts up a lot of yards, things like that. I mean, I feel like he's up there if he has a season like you would figure OSU has this year.
Yeah, something I've always thought about is, what if Taylor Cornelius connects on that 2-point conversion and wins Bedlam? He beats Kyler Murray and Norman. Everybody would think so differently of what Taylor Cornelius became. But I don't know. Even if, I don't like to get too hot takey, which is probably not. But even if they do, make the playoff, they win the Big 12. I think a lot of it's going to be judged on how much of that was Ollie Gordon. I'm not sure that that's fair to Alan Bowman. And obviously he can, shut up any naysayers with a solid, season. And I think he's more than capable of that. His first couple of years at Texas Tech, he obviously showed that he had a very high ceiling. Gets injured, has some crazy injuries, and I think he had like 2 punctured lungs at one point. So he maybe didn't necessarily reach that potential that maybe they saw in him as a freshman or sophomore. But with this offense, of all offenses, I don't see how he couldn't, bring that back and be the guy that people thought he was going to be when he was a freshman at Tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bowman could be could have a really, really good legacy, kind of like you're saying, Dekota. I mean, just if he gets back-to-back Big 12 championship games, but it could be overshadowed by Ollie. It could just be, it's the Ollie show, and he's the guy on the college football game. He's the guy who's in the news, seems like not most recently for the greatest reasons ever, but could be for the greatest reasons ever if it all plays out the way we hope it does, at the end of the season too. I recently did a podcast where we ranked all the Oklahoma State quarterbacks, and I was very interested, Marshall, coming back to something you said about Spencer Sanders. Of OSU grad and myself both had Sanders and Cornelius. We had it the opposite way, but kind of next to each other. He had Corndog, remembered him a little bit better than Spencer Sanders, and I think most of that's just because kind of the exit some of these guys have. Do you guys think there's a position group, from either wide receiver or, can't really say running back or anything, that we're more deficient in? We've lost either to the transfer portal or any kind of key deficiencies this team has overall?
I think edge rusher is going to be a little bit of a question for me. I think they're going to supplement that. Obviously, Colin Oliver is going to play on the end some. Gundy's been a little coy in saying just how much, just like with Kendall Daniels playing linebacker. He hasn't quite, and maybe he doesn't know yet. Maybe through fall camp, they're kind of learning this a little bit. So I think edge rushers, just you lose Latu, you lose Goodlow. You bring back Walter Scheid, who I think does a lot of things well, but his numbers don't necessarily always say that. So then you're looking at a Jaleel Johnson or Deshaun Brown, those type of guys. Because I think a lot of their defensive struggles last year, it didn't help that they were young in the secondary. but then it also didn't help that young secondary that they didn't put a ton of pressure on the quarterback. And that's something that, those Jim Knowles defenses did a lot, obviously with Colin Oliver, Brock Martin, guys like that. So I think that's one position group that I'm a little questionable at, but it's not because I don't think that they have the guys. It's just more so, is a Deshaun Brown ready to kind of step into that role? Is a Cody Walterscheid ready to, pressure the quarterback and do more things than maybe, slowing down run game? So I think if they can get to the quarterback a little bit more this year, everything's going to be fine. But I am going to have a close eye on those defensive ends going into game one.
I would agree with Marshall as well. This is the defensive line. I thought times, because there were times last year, obviously, when people were like, what in the world is going on with this defense? But it seemed like when there were offenses kind of having their way with the defense, it's because the quarterback was just able to sit back there, do what he wanted to do. And you're in the Big 12. You're in the Big 12. Any quarterback, even an average quarterback in the Big 12, is probably pretty solid, even in today's world. So give any quarterback time, they're going to be able to pick you apart and make your defense look tough. And you pressure any quarterback, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to help out your guys. And I thought, sometimes last year, I thought the defensive backs kind of got the wrong the deal, because people were like, oh, they're giving up this, giving up. But they're have to cover these guys forever. They're not really getting any help up front. So I would definitely agree with Marshall, where if there's a weak spot, as of now going in, I would say it was up front, defensive line.
Gotcha. All right. Well, kind of on that note of getting to the quarterback, at least, which of the quarterbacks in the Big 12 do you think we're facing that we have the kind of the toughest battle against, or maybe even just team overall that we're going to face this year, or at least planned? Hopefully we get a couple more games into the season, but which team do you think's hardest for us to beat?
I think everybody's going to point to Utah, which is, obvious. Utah, K-State. I'm excited to see Avery Johnson, their quarterback, kind of push Will Howard to Ohio State, which is an interesting thought, because Ohio State's thought to be this juggernaut of a team this year, when really their starting quarterback, Skyler Howard, is it Skyler Howard, or am I way off?
Will Howard.
Will Howard.
Yeah,
Skyler Thompson,
close.
Will Howard, they're the same person. Yeah. They're totally the same person. But it's interesting that this Avery Johnson guy goes and essentially pushes him out, and he lands at Ohio State of all places. So I think I'm really excited to watch him play and kind of what they do with him, because he was used more as a runner last year. He's not going to be able to just be solely a runner this year. So I'm excited to see that. And I've been really high on West Virginia, just because I think they've got a lot of good pieces. Neil Brown's team was picked last year, which I thought was incredibly disrespectful, given that there were 4 Group of 5 teams moving into the conference. And then I think they went and won 9 games, saves his job. They get Jaden Bray, who Oklahoma State fans will know whenever he's healthy, he's a weapon. So I'm intrigued by Garrett Green and West Virginia. But then, obviously the big two are going to be Utah and K-State.
On that. Is it Rising? Is Rising the Utah?
Cam Rising, yeah. And obviously there's Shadur Sanders, which is that'll just be fun, regardless of what happens or what's going on at that time of the year. That'll just be fun to take in. And
I feel like that game's hard to even think about at this point, because we have no idea. That could be a team that OSU's playing that's a 4-win team like last year, and they could be 10-0. You don't know what we're getting there. But I do think Rising, as far as, is he the only player in college football that's older than Alan Bowman, with more experience at least. And so those two going at it, if anyone, coming in, you're picked to win the league, a hostile environment, the first time you're playing an actual Big 12 team, the asterisk that's next to whenever they played Baylor before or whatever. But when they come into Stillwater, it's a tough environment, but if anyone's going to be able to handle it, it's going to be a guy like that, where maybe the BPS crowd won't phase like they would the other people coming in.
Well, talking about the crowd though, all 6 home games are sold out, to the general public or so. What do you guys think has led to that? Just because I don't think we've seen a sold out season, at least for a little bit, and maybe a while, in Boone Pickens. I don't think, at least since the seating capacity's changed.
Yeah, so I think this is the first time that it's ever sold out before the season. I think they sold out all their games technically last year. But it was, I forgot at what point, but this is the first time that before the season started, all the games are sold out. Obviously, a little bit of help, but it's not, they're still, I don't know what the capacity is at this point, because they keep lowering it a little bit. But they do that, all those renovations, and that lowers the seating capacity a little bit. That helps a tiny little bit. But they're still, you're still funneling it in at least 52,000 or whatever the number is at these days. people into the stadium. So I think it's just general excitement for college football. I think this fan base is really excited to see Ollie Gordon. Is really excited to see this team with college football playoff aspirations ahead of it. They've got a chance in every game that they're going to play in. So I think it's just kind of general excitement. I think that's a good spot to be. I think if you're an Oklahoma State fan.
I think the change in general, because I thought it was, I correlated not only this week did they announce that, or last week they announced that they sold all the football tickets, but then today wrestling has also sold all of the reserved season tickets. There's still some general admission in this new little club area, like bar area they've unveiled. But other than that, I mean, all of it, and it's August. I mean, wrestling season doesn't start until, November or something like that. I should know that since you guys just called me the wrestling guy. But it's still a couple months away, and people are still excited. But again, new coach, lots of change going on. Just like football, a lot of change. And I think the fan base, like Weiberg mentioned, this is on the fan base. This is a fan base maturing. And I think Gundy will answer it. He's been asked a million times about kind of OSU becoming the major brand of the Big 12. But I think fans are starting to feel that now of, hey, we're the big dogs in the conference. We got to sell out. We got to be the loudest venue in the conference and whatever it takes. Because we're now the blue blood of the Big 12 in a way. So we kind of have to have that environment as well.
Yeah, would you guys say if we don't make it to the Big 12 championship year, is that a bad sign? I mean, what do you think the hopes and expectations are, at least around the team?
Yeah, I think anything short of making that game again, just because they made it last year with Big Bad Texas in the conference. So I think anything short of even making that, if they don't even make that game, I think that's going to be really tough. And obviously, the crazy part is we won't know, but we'll have a pretty good idea 2 games into the Big 12 slate because they get Utah and at K-State. So those are the top 3 teams everybody assumes going into the year. I think there are a handful of others that can contend and can make that game. But I think if OSU splits that game, splits those games or wins them both, I think you're setting up really well. If you lose them both, it's probably not the end of the season, but it certainly would seem like it's going to be a tough road to get back to Arlington.
What do you guys think about Arizona? Because when you're talking about the conference games, that's immediately where my mind goes. Is like, weirdly enough, K-State and Arizona have, I think, the most fortunate outcome of this whole entire new Big 12, where they have a non-conference game, even though they're both in the same conference this season. It's like week 2. But what do you guys think about Arizona? Because they're the one team we don't face on the schedule that I am more worried about, or it's just ranked pretty highly there as well too.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Arizona, just because Jed Fish leaves for Washington and Brent Brennan obviously comes in. They keep the quarterback, they keep the the All-American wide receiver whose last name I have no shot at pronouncing. So I don't know what to make of it. Is it just going to be the Jimmys and Joes are better than the X's and O's? I don't know. Maybe they'll be fine. Maybe it'll be like nothing ever happened. Maybe it'll be like they didn't lose their coach. But I don't know. And Brent Brennan didn't have a stellar record, I believe, at San Jose State. He might have won or lost more games than he won. That's reckless of me to just say without knowing. But I think they're just very confusing to me, just because they bring a bunch of guys back, but at the same time, they've got a new coach, new schemes, new terminology, I'm sure. So I don't know what to make of Arizona.
And maybe it's just because they're not on the OSU schedule, but I do feel like it's a team that's flying very under the radar. So maybe we're just not talking about them because we don't have to worry about them because they're not on the schedule. But I do feel like that's a team that beat OU last year in the Alamo Bowl and was, they're in running for the Pac-12 title pretty late in the season. And so, that's a solid team to bring over. And yeah, like you said, Calvin, no one's really paying much attention to them because they did lose their head coach.
Yeah, and Marshall, I did just check it here just because I didn't know either. But yeah, Brennan was 34-48, but he was the first coach in program history to take to qualify for 3 bowl games.
There you go.
Qualify is the interesting word there too, not to make it, but to qualify. So I wonder what happened with San Jose State at some point. Seems like they didn't get invited, but qualified.
Yeah, it seems like they made bowl games 3 of his last 4 years there. So obviously the program is headed in the right direction. But just with as good as Arizona was last year, to hire a guy who has a losing coaching record So obviously could be seen as, some type of ways, but maybe everything's fine. Obviously I wasn't in the room interviewing him or anything. So I'm sure that the fine people at Arizona did a great job.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to talk about wrestling here in just 1 second, but lastly, just ask you guys for kind of you kind of danced around it here, but what do you think are realistic, kind of win-loss for the team here in the regular season at least?
You can go first, Dakota.
Oh, thanks. I would say 10 wins for sure, right? I feel like that kind of measures what a successful season is, 10 wins. I would say 10-2 still gets in the Big 12, right? Even if you drop one of to Utah, Kansas State, it's OSU, so they're going to lose a game somewhere along the way that they shouldn't lose, and make people worried that they're not going to get into wherever they want to get into. So I would say regular season 10-2, and I would still, it's hard to predict before December, but I would predict them to beat Utah or Kansas State again, or an Arizona in the Big 12 championship. So that would be my prediction, is a 10-win season.
Yeah, I'd say regular season goes. I think 10-2 is probably a good shout. I bet this is just life of the kind of, like Dakota said, lifelong Oklahoma State follower. I bet they could split Utah and K-State and then just drop a game that nobody's expecting after that. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough to keep this team out of the Big 12 title game just because of how experienced they are. They've got Ollie Gordon. They were there last year. They should be motivated to get back. So. I think 10-2 as far as the regular season goes is probably a pretty comfortable pick. Obviously, Vegas, I think last I saw Vegas was like 7.5. I don't see that happening, but maybe I'm trying to even look at the schedule. Maybe like I said, West Virginia is going to be pretty good. Outside of that, I don't know how. I would take the over, I guess is what I'd say. But yeah, 10-2 I think is a pretty comfortable bet.
Well, I would say BYU and Colorado might be tough road trips, and if they drop one, it's probably one of those. But I don't think they would lose both.
Yeah, I think they could lose to West Virginia.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that if Colorado's season doesn't go how the Buffaloes hope, that Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter aren't even playing by that point in the season. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that Colorado game, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they found a way to drop something that maybe the fan base doesn't necessarily want them to. But I think West Virginia's a good team. Who knows what TCU after making the national final and then not making a bowl game. And then Tech is always Texas Tech. They'll at least have hype. Will they do anything with it? Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, the deny-me scenario for me is Shadur Sanders comes into that game with a Heisman hopefulness behind him. Pulling off something where no one else really leading the way in Heisman kind of odds. He's kind of the name that's always still around, and then they're trying to get him to 9 wins or something. I don't see a way that happens. To be honest, I don't see a way that Colorado really gets over 7 wins. But the one other team that I do think has a fair shot that we don't play this year of making the Big 12 title and haven't talked about is KU, just with how easy their schedule is. The only team they play that I give any real serious talk to is K-State. Last football question, I guess. Do you guys see anything out of KU where you go, hey, maybe we should talk about them football-wise this year for once?
Yeah, I think Jalen Daniels needs to stay healthy, and if he does, I think they've got Devin Neal back as well. That's going to be a really good team. But I think we've kind of seen that, if he's unable to stay healthy, then things are going to get a little shaky. But I think very highly of Lance Leipold and kind of the job that he's done in really resurrecting a program that many thought dead. But yeah, I think they're certainly in contention just based off their schedule. They've got K-State, they've got West Virginia. But then other than that, it's a lot of teams that you would think that they have a good shot. And I know that Iowa State's getting a lot of love going into the season. They beat Oklahoma State last year, so I guess what can I say? They play Colorado, which, again, who knows what Colorado can or will be. But yeah, I think as long as Jalen Daniels stays healthy, I think Kansas has a shot in any game it plays in.
Well, Dakota, you touched on it earlier. Wrestling season has already sold out. Oklahoma State hasn't even updated the schedule online to say what the next opponents are. But of course, I don't think we have the wrestling schedule yet, anyways. But with that being said, what do we need to know about David Taylor? Let's say I'm a huge Oklahoma State fan who remembers, of course, John Smith, and will go to a bunch of duels as a college student. But I think I've been to back to one since, and I don't ever think we were bad at wrestling, but also I don't think we were ever great at wrestling since 2018 when I graduated. Am I missing anything? What else do I need to know?
I think the best non-wrestling analogy I saw, and I knew because Marshall isn't as much a wrestling guy, and he was like, hey, this is a good point. It's like, imagine, like, yeah, they had John Smith's a big deal, but imagine you're a football player and now Tom Brady walks in and that's your football coach now. That's kind of what they're getting now. Can he coach? I don't know. No one knows. But all I know is, like, I talked to Bo Bassett last week, and he's like a generational type recruit is what they're calling him. He was in Oklahoma putting on a camp on his own. And he's going to be a junior in high school. And so I was talking to him, and even for him, like, it was a huge deal to get a phone call from David Taylor. It's a huge deal to meet David Taylor for dinner. These recruits, like, that is a big deal. He was, now we got the most recent Olympics done, but the Olympics before that, he won a gold medal. That was the crazy part, is during the Olympics as it was going on, I'm just thinking, that was like eye-opening of, like, the last time this was happening, the dude coaching Oklahoma State was winning a gold medal. And even now, the U.S. for the first time since, like, the 50s didn't win a gold medal, or a male gold medal in wrestling. So right now, he's the most recent to win a gold medal, most recent male to win a gold medal in wrestling for the United States. And he's still in good enough shape where, he was trying to make the wrestling team in April, May, whenever it was in April, and got upset by Aaron Brooks, but he's training with those people. You get Wyatt Hendrickson in, who's a 3-time All-American or 4-time All-American from Air Force. When I saw Wyatt Hendricks post something and he's wrestling with David Taylor. That's the guy where it's not like baseball and football where your coach is just maybe hitting you ground balls or directing you and helping you out. You're actually sparring with the guy. You're actually wrestling him, and here he's in good enough shape and was one of the best wrestlers in the world. Definitely was the best wrestler in the world 3 years ago, and one of the best even currently right now as he's training with you, and not to mention Thomas Gilman and the guys he brings in the room who are also Olympians and Team USA kind of guys. And so that's just a huge, is the recruiting aspect, and just the fact that, hey, he's not just coaching these guys, but he can actually get on the mat with them, roll around with them. Obviously, I don't think a 60-year-old something John Smith was doing that anymore. But that's what he had when he was first getting into it. That was a big deal, is when John Smith walked into a room or walked into your house, you wore shoes, you had his poster on your wall if you're wrestling, if you're a young wrestler. And that's kind of what they're getting again now with David Taylor as well.
Yeah, Marshall, have you seen stuff like site-wide just really tick up on the wrestling side of it since David Taylor's come in?
I think so, yeah, but also wrestling stuff is just always kind of going crazy. I think it's probably because there's not a ton of outlets that maybe cover wrestling as intently as we do, and there is a passionate fan base there for it. Obviously, we had Seth Duckworth for a really long time covering wrestling for us. People read his stuff plenty as well, not to hype up Dekota, because I think that it's very evident in things we write that people are very excited for wrestling and kind of this new wave with David Taylor.
Yeah. Do you think there's is there anything else more behind this? Is this also like influence some NIL money coming in for wrestlers, or just besides just the normal recruiting aspect? You're saying Tom Brady walks in the room. That's an incredible analogy, because that actually puts it like kind of in my own headspace where I can go, okay, that's the guy. But gold medal, I had no idea some of this stuff here. So what else is kind of David Taylor doing maybe that's not as conventional that you've seen before in college wrestling?
I would assume there's some NIL money just because of the fact of the kind of guys he's bringing in, which they brought in 4 very good guys out of the portal. But I think 2 of them they already had before DT was even at OSU. John Smith was still the coach when they committed. Then they added mine and Wyatt Hendrickson, who's probably their biggest get from the portal. He's a freak. Like Marshall, every time we see him, Marshall just kind of stares in all of them at Big 12 tournament, because he's going to be defensive end one day. He's going to pull Gable Stevenson. He's going to be playing defensive end for NFL team one day. Like, that's just how he's built. And so now he gets to be in Stillwater, which the perk for him coming from Air Force is this is his first time he's allowed to get NIL money. When you're at the academy, you can't do that. So I imagine he was looking for a pretty good bag when you're doing that well and you haven't been able to for the last 2 years. But we kind of talked before we started this of the Paycom CEO was the one, and surprisingly, Weiberg was pretty open about, like, hey, he made this possible. Like, he wants wrestling in the state of Oklahoma. It was rumored that David Taylor apparently got a phone call from him to go to OU last year. David Taylor says he never got the call. He was just OSU. He's just wanting the state of Oklahoma for wrestling to be a big deal there, which, again, talking to Bo Bassett last week, he's like, wrestling's a big deal there. He's like it is in Pennsylvania where he's from, and wrestling's a huge deal. He's like, I get that same vibe of wrestling and football in Oklahoma as well. And so that's what Chad Reeson, I think is his name. Richardson. Chad Richardson from Paycom. So I imagine there's more money than just going. I mean, David Taylor's making over $1 million. Kel Sanderson's Penn State, I don't know how they legally do it, but they only release the numbers of their contract for their head football coach. We don't know what Penn State, the best wrestling coach, I mean, maybe ever. I mean, it's hard to, I know this is an OSU podcast to say that with John Smith. So we don't know exactly what he's making. But as far as we know, I mean, he's not making $1 million. And so for David Taylor, for them to make him the first college wrestling coach that's making $1 million, the highest paid guy in the country ever, highest paid college wrestling coach ever, they're throwing a lot of money in it. And I would assume whoever's throwing that money, whether it's not just Chad and it's others, they know that only goes so far in today's college world where they need, hey, we got to throw this money to get recruits too. And right now, they're getting the recruits who are probably getting offered a lot of money from the Iowas and the Penn States of the world as well.
And Ed Gallagher has something to say about all that. But also he's Dekota. It's going to know more about this than I do, but it seems like some new life has been breathed into the RTC, which is kind of a foreign concept to general sports fans, but in wrestling, it's a very big deal. It's kind of where your potential Olympians come to train. They bring in Roman Bravo Young, who essentially kept Dayton Fix from a couple of national titles. But it seems like some kind of whole new life is getting breathed into that, to where maybe Penn State isn't having a stranglehold on, having the best RTC in the country. It's going to take some building, I have no doubt, but it seems like they've taken some really good steps under David Taylor.
Yeah, Roman Bravo Young he was wrestling in the Olympics, 2 weeks ago, never ended, for Mexico. And now he's going to be, if you're a Troy Spratley or a Kel Hughes, they're 125, 133 pounders. When you go on a practice every day, you're wrestling. Dayton Fix is still supposed to be around. Roman Bravo Young, Thomas Gilman, all those are guys that have even made Team USA or Team Mexico or been very close to making an Olympic team. And that's who you're learning from and you're getting to go up against every day. But what the RTC is basically, it's just like a wrestling program's club team, I guess, is a way. Like, it's affiliated, but it's not affiliated. Just like when I was trying to get information, trying to figure out exactly what Roman Bravo Young's role was Saturday night when they released it. It's like OSU's SIDs. Like, I don't know as much, right? Because it is a separate entity technically, but yet David Taylor is still in charge of it for the most part. And then they usually have a guy that's technically in charge of it. But yes, it is mostly to get them ready for international stuff. So you can bring in Roman Bravo Young, being a Penn State guy, bring him in. Now he trains internationally in Stillwater. And that's just going to draw more talent when people know I'm not only wrestling a good guy at my weight, but even if I become the best guy at my weight, they're going to have other really good dudes who are grown men competing for world spots that I can take on and practice against every day too.
So, see, I think I just have one more follow-up question on the RTC thing, because you answered basically everything I was going to ask beforehand, but the pros of being in the RTC is that it's a job, right? Like, it is a job for wrestling guys after graduation to help train younger wrestlers, but also to stay in shape to compete, internationally.
Well, I couldn't say for sure. Like, I don't know if they're paying Roman Bravo Young. I do know he's going to get paid from Team Mexico and endorsements and things like that. They get paid. I know they used to struggle. John Smith told me, it's been 5, 6, 7 years ago now, but he was like, the guys doing that now they're doing just fine. He said, we struggled. They're doing fine now. If they're good enough to be on the verge of making a Olympic team, that they're doing okay. But I know Roman Bravo Young is not technically a coach. He's just training there. Obviously, they're going to learn. He's going to coach a guy up that, hey, do this, do that, and he's going to be there. He's just not on staff as a coach. And usually what they do is they look for, hey, what room has the best people that's going to make me the best? When you're Roman Bravo Young, you go in a room with Thomas Gilman and Dayton Fix. That's going to attract him. David Taylor's trick now will probably be trying to get the first upper weight guy to come to get more. Because right now, he wants a Kyle Dake, who, if maybe there's a bigger name in wrestling than David Taylor, it might be him at this moment, to get him. But then Kyle Dake might not have anyone to wrestle. If he plans to continue his career, he's kind of getting older by international wrestling standards. But that is what it is. It's mainly they're coming to train, you're getting better to train, and it's just they're letting you're hand in hand. You get facilities, you get coached by David Taylor and Thomas Gilman, but you also get you want the best guys in the room to train with as well.
Gotcha. So for example, it would be it doesn't exist for other sports because other sports have just minor leagues or other leagues overall, but it would basically be, hey, this is the, World Wrestling Championship, or conference or whatever, and there's one in Stillwater, there's one in Penn State, there's one that's coming to RTC is after graduation, place for you to train, not necessarily get paid, right?
Yeah, I mean, and every university, as far as I know, basically every university has one. OU has one, Iowa obviously has one. It'd just kind of be like, hey, Mason Rudolph is playing for the Pixels. He's playing professionally now. There's no league. So he's not going to be, or Tennessee, he's not going to go to Tennessee and Nashville to train and to play and prepare for a season. He's going to stay in Stillwater. And guess what? Now, Alan Bowman, Zane Flores, Garrett Rangel, whoever, you're learning from him as well. He's on staff, but he's still around. He's getting paid because he's doing his professional stuff, but he's still going to be around to help and train and practice with these guys as well. So
kind of like Victor Hovland coming to train at Karsten Creek, right? Just kind of display like where he calls home for the time being, where he comes to train, and it's a great place to train. Okay, cool. Well, that sounds like a pretty darn awesome deal. Is there the David Taylor part of it? Is this common in wrestling where a guy is a first time coach, just straight out, and he's also the highest paid? I mean, it seems like that'd be unusual for any other sport where you've don't have any coaching experience, but all of a sudden the first coaching job you have is also that makes you the highest paid in the sport.
Definitely seems ludicrous for people like us, right? That cover college sports. Like if they were to hire even Tom Brady, right? All he did, this was football. If Michigan, when Harbaugh left and they said, hey, we're hiring Tom Brady as the head coach and he's now the highest paid college football coach, people will still be like, why? I understand it's Tom Brady. But when people pitched the David Taylor idea to me at first, it seemed crazy because we all thought it was going to be Coleman Scott, because I was like, he's never coached, right? He had a training camp for youth, like an academy up in Pennsylvania. He's around Kel Sanderson all the time. He helped with their RTC program. So he has somewhat experience, but it did sound crazy to me because the argument was, well, John Smith did it. But what they don't remember is, one, that was it 30 years ago, 35 years ago, that John Smith took over, or 25. Anyway, it was a long time ago when he did it, and they're also in a bind. So Oklahoma State, they get some NCAA sanctions. It's right before the season. They're in a bind. Like we don't know. People can transfer. That was a rare thing back then. They said, hey, if you want to go transfer, you go where you want. And Oklahoma State's main thing was we have a lot of talent. How do we keep it? Well, John Smith, Kenny Monday were training, again, in the RTC program, training for the Olympics there. Hey, you guys have good relationships. Can you just, for the time being, be classified as a coach? You guys just run practice. They had a former AD and an AD there that was a former wrestling coach. I'll take care of scheduling. I'll take care of all the paperwork you need. I just need you to keep the guys here and the program afloat so this doesn't kill us, basically. And so they were co-coaches for a year. And then Kenny Monday stepped away from it, just did his wrestling stuff. And then John Smith, the rest is history. So when he took over OSU by himself. But it was a very different time and a very different circumstance. But, I guess if you want to hit a home run, and I don't think that would have worked 10 years ago, because I think now recruiting has more value than it ever has before, because you can get the Wyatt Hendricksons and then former All-Americans just by who you are. And right off the bat, that talent helps you compared to maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago when you actually had to develop a lot more talent and be able to bring people on immediately.
Gotcha. Well, I also want to pivot here and talk about something that you just wrote about here literally right before we started recording, and talk a little about Oklahoma State basketball, the other new head coach in Stillwater. what's going on with the 2025 like basketball recruiting class just as a whole? Marshall, I can ask you first here. Just what do you think what do you think Lutz has maybe up his sleeve, or why do you think we just had to decommit?
So Carl Sean Young, who just decommitted, he told me, I think it was literally like 2 weeks ago, I DM'd him, and he said that he was still committed, so obviously something has changed throughout that time, but he committed, I believe, last October under Mike Boynton. Obviously, the coach changed since then, and just in general, that was way early for a 25 to commit, so I wouldn't think too hard about it. It stinks a little bit, obviously, because he's an in-state kid, and Oklahoma State fans like to have those around, but they've been doing pretty well in the 25 class. I think they still need to land a guy, but they've been popping up on a lot of these lists. Most recently, Sebastian Williams-Adams, who's a consensus like top 40 prospect, 6'8" power forward, isn't afraid to shoot the three. So I think they've been on 4 or 5 of these list cuts. Now it's going to kind of be official visits are going to start as the football season starts. That's whenever a lot of visitors for all sports come to town. So I think that's when it's really going to kind of start to take off. But I think Carl Sean Young's just more a matter of, Boynton got fired, kind of took some time to, kind of view the options. I imagine both sides did that a little bit, and found it just kind of wasn't the spot for him right now. So I wouldn't be ringing any alarm bells. But yeah, I think this first 4 or 5 weeks of football season is going to be pretty telling in kind of what kind of recruiter Steve Lutz is. But with basketball, it's always a little tough at this point to put too much on 1 or 2 recruits, especially high school guys, because that the portal is going to come after the season. And a lot of teams just like to, pretty much wipe their slate clean and start with a whole new portal roster. So, I think just based on the offers that he's put out and things along that nature, I do think he's planning on taking 1 or 2 or 3 high school guys. But who those guys are kind of remain to be seen after these official visits.
Yeah, Dekota, what do you think as far as the 2025 class for Lutz?
I'm going to be 100% honest. Most of my basketball knowledge comes from reading Marshall Scott on pistolsfiringblog.com. So anything I have to say is probably something when I'm in my wrestling zone. Marshall's in his basketball zone, so we read each other and edit each other, and Kyle fills in the gaps as well, and mainly does a lot of basketball as well. So Kyle would probably know more about basketball than I do just because I'm on my wrestling zone. I was curious with Marshall, though, not the host, but I have a question. I saw, because I just read the story, he had an offer from Kansas. Did he have offers like that when Boynton was after him and he was still committed to OSU as well?
Yeah, so he started out as a pretty big-time recruit. I think ESPN still ranks him as a 4-star, which is ESPN's kind of slow to move on these type of things, honestly. But the other outlets have kind of cooled on him. He's moved around a little bit. I think he was in West Virginia one year. I think maybe he's overtime leading. There's been so many basketball prospects that have ran through my head over the last couple of weeks, but he's moved around a little bit. That I'm not sure that's maybe the most beneficial thing for him. Good, better, indifferent. And so I think he's taking a little bit. He did have a Kansas offer. I don't know that at this point Kansas would take him necessarily. But yeah, so I think at one point he was thought of pretty highly. I imagine he's still got that in him. I just not sure that all these moves have been beneficial for him. But OSU did add a player to its ranks today. A Canadian, Mikey Kelvin. He joins the team immediately, takes up scholarship number 12. So Steve Lutz still has one left. He's a 6'6" guy out of Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. I don't know what to make of that. He averaged 10 points a game, shot 38% from 3, so those are good numbers. But he's kind of another 6'6" guy. Whenever they're kind of needing a big at this point to join that Xavier transfer. But it seems like just throughout Steve Lutz's recruitment so far, based off the guys he's brought in the portal, it very much seems like he has a type of just kind of relentless tryhards, and I think that's not a fun team to play against. I imagine if you're the opposition. So I think that'll be fun. I think it'll get GIA on its feet a little bit. With that being said, they need some more size right now. But before I'm ready to get too audacious with any takes that I have on the basketball team, they definitely need some size to go into the Big 12.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything we know as Oklahomans, Canadians can play some basketball.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is for sure. I think I wonder the Canada basketball team which state watched more Canadian basketball than any other state, I had to say it's probably Oklahoma. Other than that, it's probably just one of the states that's right close to Canada. But other than that, I think it's got to be Oklahoma. Got to be Shea and Lou Dort, of course.
Absolutely.
Also, just want to ask about you guys here too. When I'm looking through it, I mean, and Marshall, you were right. He is an OTE overtime elite player at Midwest City. So it's just kind of wild, the in-state guys. But his Twitter bio is 6'5", combo guard, 4-star, and number 1 player in Oklahoma. So he's definitely proud of his Oklahoma heritage, which as 2 other Oklahomans are on the podcast with me, I assume we're all excited about here, right?
Yeah, but the state of Oklahoma's got to do something with all their basketball players are leaving the state. This is a rant that I've got deep that has nothing to do with OSU athletics, but goodness gracious, we've got to figure something out to keep these guys in state.
Well, I could join you in that rant because I have my youngest brother is an Oklahoma State Public School student. I was a former Oklahoma State Public School student, and my rant to end all rants of Oklahoma State Public Schools, there's too many schools. It's just divided way too far. And David, you've got high school graduating classes of 100 here, 100 there, 80 here, 80 there, whereas you've got 3 Edmond schools. And so if you're going to Edmond, you're graduating from North, Memorial, or Santa Fe. And that's, I mean, there's Piedmont, but I could go on for forever about that. It's just divvied up way too far. Bethany is 1 school, and it has however many kids graduate from Bethany. So, anyways, that's the youngest player who plays high school sports, at least. He was the starting kicker for his team last year after never kicking a football ever in his life beforehand. Played soccer, but he also had the first tackle of the season last year, on the kick return. A guy coming back down where my dad was grimacing a little bit as he tackled him because we didn't know he knew how to do that. But with that being said, when it comes to the football season, basketball season, baseball, even wrestling, which sport are you guys most excited for this year?
I mean, it's got to be football because it's football. I'm excited for basketball. I'm always excited for basketball. Team's got a whole new look to it. I believe this is the Canadian they brought in. I believe it's the 9th new scholarship player that they brought in this offseason. So that's almost like an entirely different thing. Very different from football where everybody is the same. And it's at the point in these preseason news conferences that we don't really, I anyways, don't really know what to ask about because I've seen all these guys play, and it's been months since I've actually seen them play, so we're kind of running out of questions. But I think it's got to be football season for me, just because you got Ollie Gordon, all the hype is there, the new look league, and then on top of that, there's a 12-team playoff that's more reachable than it's ever been. So I think for all of those reasons, I'm going to say football.
I would probably on the same page as Marshall as far as like he is a basketball at the time, like wrestling, but at the end of the day, no one's catching Penn State in the next year or two, no matter what David Taylor magically brews up in the next couple of months. So we kind of know how the outcome's going to be, and I don't think we know what in the world this football season holds, even though we're really optimistic. So I think I'm definitely more excited, just even on the national landscape. 12-team playoff, OU Texas, how are they going to do in the SEC, things like that. So I definitely think there's a lot of exciting changes going on in football that has me excited for a football season I think I've been in a really long time.
Yeah, I got to say, for me as well, it's got to be football. But I'm also just really curious about this basketball season because Marshall, you were touching on earlier, getting a bigger guy in. I am scared of this Green Bay team that we're going to play in basketball. I just they don't have Cisse, but they have a different Cisse, and of course they have Jeremiah Johnson and Isaiah Miranda on the team, both one former Oklahoma State commit and the other one Oklahoma State player for a couple minutes here and there. Do you guys make anything at all about, I mean, I know it's a former Oklahoma State guard, of course, is their head coach, and Doug Gottlieb. Either of you guys make anything at all about him getting 2 former Oklahoma State guys? And have ties at least?
Yeah, I think Doug was not heavily involved with the program, but maybe, he was I think technically considered an advisor last year. So I think he was just so ingrained in the program that it made sense whenever those guys hit the portal. Miranda didn't initially have an immediate landing spot to bring a guy like that in. And if Isaiah Miranda can figure it out, he's going to be incredibly good. He's 7'1", ridiculously tall, ridiculously athletic, and can shoot the 3. So and then Jeremiah Johnson, very similarly to Carl Sean Young, was thought at different points to be a very highly regarded recruit. moves around. Some of that, he also got shot, which was obviously a pretty traumatic thing that happened to him. So, his road has been rather winding, but I think he's probably still got that in him. So, yeah, I don't think it's anything, diabolical or anything. I think it's more so just Doug Gottlieb knows these guys, has been around this program, and then whenever they elect to leave the program, it just kind of made sense that he had a connection there. But
I would imagine that's going to be like Gottlieb's Super Bowl. Like,
it might be my Super Bowl. This game might be my Super Bowl. It's for a season opener. Usually season openers, you've got little to nothing to write about. You hope the superstar freshman goes off, but this one's going to have storylines out the wazoo. So I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait to go to that game. I think it'll be a ton of fun. Are you already picking out which Jordans to wear?
Oh no, I haven't bought any in a really long time. We bought a house, so it's like the Jordan money definitely goes out the drain there. But I'll probably wear either my black cement 3s or my low 11s. I haven't got anything in a long time. Don't plan on getting anything between then. And when push comes to shove, I'll probably just wear some Air Maxes.
Dakota, what about you? I think you got a pair or two, right?
I have some, but again,
you're not the basketball. Yeah.
Let's say my kid got old enough now where he can ask for things, and I'm bad at telling him no. So now the extra money we have no longer goes to shoes, but goes to whatever Mickey toy that he wants of the day, basically, or Disneyland trips. Disneyland trips takes up a lot of shoe money that you had.
Yeah,
we're getting old.
I'm going to Disney. I'm going to Disney World for the first time with my fiance and her niece, or I guess our niece and nephew, and their family. So I'm sure be saving up for that trip, as well as also in the same boat as Marshall here, saving up for a house as well too. So I don't think I'm buying any new Jordans here anytime soon. Last question for you guys here is kind of end this one out. Where's your favorite place to watch? Like, of all the Oklahoma State sporting venues, what's your favorite place to watch a game? And I know you guys are you're covering the games more or less now, right? And I should say more often than not, you're always covering games. But where would you say your favorite place to see a game is? Which venue?
Yeah, I'm gonna take the very boring answer again and kind of just say BPS. It's just a cathedral, really. It's the tight sidelines. I just kind of love everything about it. But there's not many bad places to watch OSU athletics. Cowgirl Stadium, even for as ugly as it is, I hope nobody takes offense in me saying that. The things that they've done in the outfield with the decks and things of that nature, it's really like a huge block party going on whenever you're at a Cowgirl softball game. Obviously, O'Brate is gorgeous. Gallagher Ibarino, whenever it's full, it's a lot of fun. Here lately, it has not been full. So maybe Steve Lutz will get that righted, and GIA will be the place to be again. But BPS with the sidelines, it's just kind of the image of my childhood. That's what I watched all the time. So it's going to be tough for anything to supplant that for me.
I think for me, I've been covering wrestling since my first year of college, so 10 years, and some sport even after college for part-time people for Pistols Fire in the last year. And maybe it'll be a little different now since John Smith, but it's always been special to me as I would walk in that entrance and Hall of Fame's right there, and I would go get my Dr. Pepper, my popcorn, and to walk by those trophies, and you see John Smith's winning gold or winning gold twice, and know he's out in the history there and what all's in Hall of Fame, to know, well, that's this program. And
Heritage Hall.
Out there, Heritage Hall.
Who are you?
The Heritage Hall. And seeing all the history there and knowing, like, wow, that is this program. And so that always, I don't know, it gives me a special feeling. I always enjoy and look forward to that brief moment of walking through there and going out, seeing the mat down at GIA.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, both great answers. And tied up so well here. So next time I see you guys, I'll definitely try to carry a couple Dr. Peppers with me and hand them out for sure. Maybe now a bucket of popcorn too. If for anyone listening or watching here on YouTube, please follow at Pistols Guys on Twitter /X, and of course follow Marshall and Dekota, Pistols Firing Blog. What's your guys' exact Twitter handles? I just follow Pistols Guys, of course, and then I see all your stuff there anyways.
Mine is at Dekota Gregory.
Okay, all right.
Mine's at Marshall Scott, okay.
Good ones for sure. Well, thank you both so much for joining here on latest episode of the CJ Tour. If you're not already, follow at the CJ Tour on basically wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you're seeing this. But that being said, thank you guys again so much here, and go Pokes.